Hey everyone, I'm Matt, and welcome to the Good Trouble Show. The Pentagon, along with the Central Intelligence Agency, has a long list of illegally hiding their dirty deeds from Congress and the American people. From the Church Committee to Watergate to Iran-Contra to Iraq weapons of mass destruction, Pentagon and intelligence leadership views our elected officials, including the President of the United States, as temporary employees flying in the face of the Constitution. The report on the historical record of U.S. government involvement with unidentified anomalous phenomenon, issued by the Department of Defense All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office and former director Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, is yet another chapter of the Department of Defense and the CIA giving Congress and the President of the United States literally the middle finger, while at the same time illegally peddling propaganda to the American public. Joining us today to discuss this constitutional crisis is legendary attorney Danny Sheehan. But first, please hit the subscribe button and thumbs up button on YouTube. You can also find us on Twitter at Good Trouble Show and all other social media platforms at The Good Trouble Show. We always appreciate a comment, share, like, give a thumbs up, all that kind of good stuff. It really helps us out. And of course, as always, a subscribe. You can also find us on your favorite podcasting platforms. Just search for The Good Trouble Show. In addition, you can also become a financial supporter of The Good Trouble Show by going to www.patreon.com/The Good Trouble Show. And for the price of a coffee, you can support our work. Finally, on YouTube, Super Chats are open and are a great way to show your financial appreciation for our work. We really do appreciate that. And I want to also thank our financial supporters on Patreon and YouTube and our chat moderators who volunteer their time here and get everyone to sort of behave in the chat room. And of course, we always appreciate everyone that supports our show. Now, for the past 50 years, our next guest has served as a trial attorney, appellate attorney, serving as the chief counsel for the Iran-Contra federal racketeering case, and serves as the president and legal counsel of the New Paradigm Institute in Washington, D.C. Please welcome attorney Danny Sheehan. Danny, how are you, sir?
Terrific. Great, Matt. Good to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. So the last time you were on our show, I was actually working in Las Vegas. I did our interview from my hotel room. The internet went down 3 times. My Bluetooth went down, which was really weird, was turned off on my laptop. And yeah, so let's hope the NSA leaves us alone today and we can have a good, uninterrupted interview. Now, so let's jump right into constitutional law. What is Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution of the United States, and why is it important?
Well, let me check my little Constitution that I carry around with me all the time.
I love that.
Here it is. It's Article 1, Section 1. The first Section 1 only says all legislative power herein granted shall be vested in Congress of the United States, which consists of the Senate and the House of Representatives. I think what you're really looking for is Section 8. Mm-hmm. Section 8 sets forth the powers of Congress. And very importantly, in Section 8, it says that they shall have the exclusive power to declare war and grant letters of marque and to make all rules concerning captures on land and water. And they also say that they have the sole power to make rules for the governing and regulation of all land and naval forces of the United States. This is basically declaring the preeminent authority of the Congress of the United States over our military activities. And even though under Article 2 of the Constitution that creates the presidency, it declares that the president is the commander of he's the commander-in-chief of the United States military. Basically, that really was intended to mean he was in charge of the military at times of war. And what the problem is that's arisen is that since 1947, with the passage of the National Security Act of 1947, the Office of the Presidency and the executive branch and the various agencies that have been set up by the National Security Act have garnered unto themselves the authority to think that they're in charge of basically mounting a perpetual undeclared war to establish full spectrum military dominance over the planet. And pursuant to that, they believe that they have the power to lie, cheat, steal, and even kill in order to promote what they view to be the national security interests of the United States. And the problem is that they view that as including now being able to lie to the United States Congress, which pursuant to the Constitution has authority over them to determine what the rules and regulations are that are going to govern them, in the sole power to really control any type of war-making activity on the part of the United States. So that we have a real crisis that is developed in the aftermath of the passage of the National Security Act, where this national security state, this kind of deep state that is developed here in the United States, believes that they're in charge. And that they can lie to Congress, they can hold back information from Congress, they can even deceive Congress into appropriating monies for various programs and then pilfering the money out of those programs to support programs that are completely undisclosed to the Congress. And that is all generated this particular policy that we're dealing with here today, governing the issue of UFOs and the existence of a non-human intelligence, potentially extraterrestrial in nature, or even conceivably extra-dimensional in nature, which they view, the national security state people view, to be the sole domain of their covert operations. That's the constitutional crisis that we're confronting here today.
And I glossed over this a little bit at the very beginning of the show, but I think a lot of people, when they hear this, they're like, this sounds like a deep state conspiracy theory, a bunch of BS. But as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, there is a long history of the CIA, of the Department of Defense doing these sorts of things, correct?
Oh, yeah, there definitely is. I mean, I happen to have, as soon as I came out of Harvard Law School, what I had done is I was one of the two co-founders of the Harvard Civil Rights Law Review back in 1968. And that one of the things that we did is we reached out to people to find what lawyers around the country had very important constitutional issues that we could help them with. And in that context, we ended up doing the original case that established the right of journalists to protect their confidential news sources. Now, this required the journalists getting information that was secret, whether it was secret information inside corporations or it was secret information from inside the military industrial complex. But the bottom line is this put me immediately into this weird practice of working with investigative journalists to get access to secret information. This led me to being retained by the #1 corporate litigation law firm in the country because that case went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And we were representing an NBC television journalist, and the Cahill, Gordon, Sonnet, Reindel, and Ohl, this big #1 litigation corporate law firm in New York City, represented NBC. So I ended up getting to go to work with them. And while we were litigating that case in the Supreme Court, I got to be familiar with the legal counsel for the New York Times, Jim Goodell. And so we were the ones to whom he brought the Pentagon Papers. And so I got to be one of the very first people that had been able to read all 47 volumes of the top secret RAND Corporation study that showed the history of the covert operations that were engaged in by the United States, lying and deceiving Congress in the instance of the Vietnam War. And this led me into doing additional research to find out what other kind of covert programs like this the United States government had been engaged in. And so what I discovered is that this activity had been going on ever since the passing of the National Security Act of 1947. And then I discovered an extraordinarily important event that took place, which had taken place 2 years earlier, right at the end of World War II, when a fellow by the name of Edward Lansdale, who was the chief of intelligence for the U.S. Army in the Philippines at the end of World War II, had recovered some secret stashes of Japanese gold and silver and platinum that had been buried secretly in the Philippines, and that they had commandeered this gold and silver and platinum in 50-gallon barrels of diamonds and rubies and sapphires. And what they did is they went and told at that time President Truman about this, and they set up a completely off-the-books secret, above top secret, what do they call it? It was a trust that they set up, in that they kept $1.2 trillion of value in this secret trust and began financing criminal covert operations with this. And that set up the model for them, that when the one of the first recoveries of a UFO took place at Roswell, New Mexico in July of 1947, just like 2 years later, they set up a similar thing, a private, off-the-books group of civilians called, it's been called Majestic 12, but they set up this completely outside of the government organization to run covert operations to conceal this information. And that this helped embolden this whole national security state infrastructure to carry on this entire set of covert operations, working primarily under what they call the Operations Directorate of the Central Intelligence Agency, under a sub-provision of the National Security Act of 1947, Section 5412, that they work under, and they set up an entire subcommittee inside the National Security Council to run these covert operations. And that's what we're dealing with here. We've developed a state within the state, and that they view themselves as being superior to the Congress of the United States, even though the Constitution explicitly provides for the Congress having the authority to regulate them and control what they do. And that's the crisis that we're in right now. They've run completely out of control, and that they've now set themselves up where they're openly defying the United States Congress, and they're asserting the right to keep secret all the information about the UFO phenomenon, and very importantly, even keeping secret from the American people and the people of the world the fact that they know that there's an extraterrestrial civilization that's coming. Members of which are coming and going from our planet. Like, they've just taken complete charge of this area and are trying to keep the Congress in the dark, and they're lying. Most recently, last Friday, they filed, the intelligence community and the Defense Department combined filed this completely bogus report with the United States Congress, lying once again, asserting that they have no information whatsoever about the existence of any kind of a UFO crash retrieval program that is operating and attempting to back engineer the technology that is being recovered from these downed UFO craft. And it's an absolutely transparent lie, once again. So there's this long tradition of them engaging in these activities. I've been involved in the litigation now for many of these, not only the issue of the Vietnam War, secret reports in the Pentagon Papers for the New York Times, but also when I was in F. Lee Bailey's office, we represented James McCord, who was one of the burglars into the Watergate Hotel, coming to find out why they were actually in the Watergate Hotel, what it was doing, and it turns out that it was directly related to the assassination of President Kennedy. That's what they were in the headquarters trying to find out about, whether or not Larry O'Brien, who was the new head of the Democratic National Committee in 1972, knew about the fact that Richard Nixon had set up the political assassination team to kill Fidel Castro, which is the group that actually killed the president. I found all that stuff out just like 3 years out of law school. And since then, I've become the legal attorney for the Disclosure Project, uh, of Dr. Stephen Greer. I've become the lawyer for Dr. John Mack at Harvard University, who had a confrontation with the faculty over writing a book about this phenomenon. I'm the attorney for Lou Elizondo, and I'm now the founder of the New Paradigm Institute, which has a whole staff of 12 lawyers who are going to be willing to provide pro bono free legal service for the whistleblowers relating to the UFOs. And there are some 40 of them. So we're
40.
we're involved in that business, if you will, of trying to uncover the criminal covert operations of this off the books national security state infrastructure that has basically lied to Congress and stealing money from this being appropriated by Congress for other reasons. And that's why the New Paradigm Institute is kind of front and center now in the midst of this confrontation, in working with Congress, working with the Senate and House, or the Senate Intelligence Committee anyway, to try to get this law passed, this 64-page bill, to set up a completely independent panel, which is going to be extracting the information from the national security state all about UFOs and the extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional life form that is behind the UFO phenomenon.
So you would agree that what we saw Friday out of AARO from Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, it is yet just another chapter of the Pentagon and the CIA giving the middle finger to Congress and the American public, just a total whitewash, total lie.
Well, I'll go along with the total lie and the total whitewash. The giving the finger to the American people has to be a determination made by other people, or like Ross Coulthart has said, a steaming pile of dog shit, or dog turds. He referred to, that I don't use terms like that. All I'm saying is that it's not true what they're saying. It's a false representation being willingly made to the United States Congress, which is a violation of the Constitution.
It just blows me away. Now, backing up a bit, when we were talking about funding for when you were referring to funding regarding this topic in particular, one thing that I've had a couple sources tell me is part of how all of this was hidden in Congress is that certain special access programs, and I'm curious if if this is correct, mm-hmm. Special access programs can be waived or deemed as waived by Deputy Secretary of Defense Kathleen Hicks. So essentially all she has to do is tell the Gang of Eight that we're standing up a special access program. It's a support program for the Air Force. It's going to cost X amount of X amount of dollars, and that's all she has to tell them. Is that accurate?
Well, these are the unacknowledged special access programs, and that was set up originally a long time ago to try to protect the details of secrets pertaining to the nuclear weapons program that we had. That it became clear that it wasn't really necessary for the members of Congress to know the actual details of the operations of a nuclear weapon, et cetera. And they themselves recognized that they didn't need to know that detailed information, and that it was extraordinarily sensitive information at the time. If it had fallen into the wrong hands, it could be lethal, And so that what they've done is they've snuggled under that umbrella of that particular portion of the Atomic Energy Act to try to conceal a whole range of programs that pertain to the UFO issue and the issue of ET studies, the existence of this extraterrestrial civilization, and the investigations that they've been engaged in trying to determine whether or not they are potentially, or at least some of the phenomenon actually is extra dimensional. That's got nothing to do with the Atomic Energy Act. It's got nothing to do with the operations of a nuclear bomb or missile or something like that, which is the kind of technical, dangerous information that many people don't need to really know in order to perform their constitutional duties. That's considerably, categorically different than hiding the fact that there's an extraterrestrial civilization. Right. They know that, and that they've had apparently direct contact or communications with them, and they're lying about it. In under the Constitution of the United States, well, the President of the United States has the authority under Article 2 to engage in diplomatic relations and enter into treaties with foreign entities. That they can't do that without the authority of the advise and consent of the United States Senate. They have to have 2/3 of the United States Senate that support something like that. So you can't just go lying to the United States Senate in denying that you have any kind of contact with this extraterrestrial civilization. You don't have any kind of diplomatic communications going with them. In fact, deny that they even exist. I mean, this is transparently in violation of the most fundamental precepts of the Constitution of the United States.
And then you have to ask yourself, well, what agreements have been made, and who has been making them? And it's the whole thing just blows me away. It would be like not telling the President of the United States about the existence of Russia and a bunch of nukes aimed at us. It's how can the President of the United States conduct foreign policy if he doesn't know the entire picture? And the same thing for Congress. How can they effectively legislate if stuff is being hidden from them? So this report, which from Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick and AARO, essentially said there's nothing to see here. Do you think in your conversations with members of Congress, have they been fooled by this, or do they understand it's a bunch of BS?
Well, it's, I'm not a mind reader of Sean Kirkpatrick or the others, but Sean Kirkpatrick is an intelligence officer, and they're trained to deceive people, in the foreign policy area. But the fact that they've decided that they're authorized to deceive Congress, is a vast stretching of that authority. It's not just a stretching of the authority, it's a breaking of the authority. It's a breaking of the trust in the constitutional responsibilities that they have to remain governed by those elected leaders of our country in a democracy. They don't live in a world of democratic principles. They don't function in a democratic way. And I've mentioned it before. I was a student in Gov 182 at Harvard College as an undergraduate student. With Henry Kissinger, and Henry Kissinger told us right in the very first day of the first class that, look, gentlemen, he said, if there's anybody here who doesn't believe that our nation has the right to lie, cheat, steal, and even kill in order to promote the narrow interests of our own nation state, you ought to leave this class right now.
Wow.
He went on to run the basic national security state of the United States, governed by those non-ethical principles.
Unbelievable. Now, in your opinion, do you think that Sean Kirkpatrick was purposefully lying? Do you think he actually believed what he wrote? I'm just curious what your gut feeling is about all of that. I know you can't read his mind, but judge on what you've seen.
No, I believe that what he's doing is he's reading extraordinarily narrowly what he understands to have been the authority of the AARO office. And I think what he interprets it is that the only authority that he really had was to sit in an office in Washington and be available in case anybody inside the government decided they were going to insist upon revealing information about the UFO phenomenon or the issue of extraterrestrial intelligence. They were going to insist upon telling their superiors about it, and that they needed to know what the guidelines were. They needed to know who they were authorized to tell, et cetera. And so that I think that Sean Kirkpatrick was interpreting his authority as nothing more than sitting in the office waiting for them to come and tell him. And then they'd tell him, and then that was it. And he wasn't going to do anything else about it. And so that he was apparently perceiving himself as having no authority to actually look into what is being said. When I told him under oath the details about an entire event that took place of the United States Air Force bringing to Washington, D.C., the classified portions of Project Blue Book, bringing them to the Madison building, a brand new extension wing of the Library of Congress, bringing the records there, deploying 4 security men to guard the files, and me being able to look at the files. And I looked at the files and saw photographs of an indisputable UFO crash retrieval operation going on. And I gave him the information, and basically, as far as anybody can tell, he did absolutely nothing about it. Didn't take any steps at all to check with the Air Force or anybody to find out, here, tell me, show me the records of the deployment of those 4 people, about the transferring of those files to the Madison building, the authorization to have Danny Sheehan be able to see these as a special counsel, to the Congressional Research Service, a study that was being done that was requested by President Carter. There's clearly records of all of that. My familiarity with the record-keeping system of the United States military, they've clearly got records of all that. And as far as I can tell, either Sean Kirkpatrick did absolutely nothing to try to confirm that by just reaching out and asking for those records, and he did that on purpose so he could just say, oh, we have no confirmed information confirming the existence of such a crash retrieval program. So either he was consciously lying and had done something to find out, to confirm that, or he didn't bother trying to confirm it so he could say that they had no confirmed information about it. So that's, however you want to perceive that, most people are perceiving it as a bald-faced lie, I can't dispute that.
Yeah, I certainly am in that particular camp. Now, going back to AARO, my understanding is that none of the people that worked for him, even FBI and OSI liaisons, none of them had 1811 authority. So they had no power to subpoena or swear anyone in or take. Well, I mean, perhaps you can elaborate on that a little bit. And my understanding is that because he did not have that investigative authority, he really couldn't do anything. And I'm curious, do you think that was by design, or was that a kind of a mistake in the legislation that was set up by Congress when they formed AARO?
Well, I mean, that he doesn't have to have subpoena authority to contact the United States Air Force and say, look, do you have these documents? Do you have the documents that show that they brought the records there, and then who was showing them, who the men were that were deployed to guard those documents? He doesn't have to subpoena them or drag them in, or have a full-scale investigative team in order to make that inquiry. What they're doing is they're over or misreading their authority. To pretend that they didn't have any authority to do anything, basically. And so he certainly can't say that he didn't have any direct information. When I'm sitting there telling him under oath that I've seen the photographs, in an official capacity, I saw the photographs of a UFO retrieval operation that was going on with U.S. Air Force personnel all around the craft. That he can't say he doesn't have any information confirming that there's a UFO crash retrieval program, but he did say that anyhow.
And I'm just curious, what was your experience of or impression of Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick when you were providing that testimony? Did he seem interested? Did he seem disinterested? Did he ask good questions?
Well, I don't think it's necessary. He made me sign an agreement that I wouldn't go into detail about what he asked, but I'm perfectly able to tell about what I said because I've said it before. They can't ask me to come and swear under oath to tell them something and then tell me that I can't tell anybody about it, even though I've told people about it before. So I don't feel that, that I'm doing anything in violation of the agreement because he came out and lied about it and said that he hadn't been given any such information. I can't be bound by some agreement that he asked me to sign. when he's lying to the public and lying to Congress about it.
Yeah, it just blows me away. So essentially, what you testified to Sean Kirkpatrick about, from a legal perspective, does that constitute firsthand witness, firsthand? Because you hear it's all like hearsay is how a lot of this is characterized. In a court of law, how would your testimony be treated?
Oh, that's admissible evidence. I mean, that's that, that I can testify to my own first person direct knowledge that I saw photographs in an official file that was presented to me as the classified portion of Project Blue Book that had been delivered to the Madison building and had, government guards standing guard at the door of the room to which I was admitted, and shown the files that were brought there. I can say that is a UFO. There isn't any doubt about the fact that that's a UFO. It was a classic saucer, with the dome on the top of it that had crashed in this field and plowed a big gouge through the snow in dirt. They were all kicked up, and I was able to see the symbols that were around the bottom of the dome of the UFO that were absolutely nothing that I'd ever seen on Earth. They weren't Russian, they weren't Chinese, they weren't hieroglyphics, they weren't anything like that. And I traced them to make sure that I had an exact copy of what it was that they were. And I left the room. And I told Sean Kirkpatrick all about that directly, and that is direct admissible evidence. Now, the question is, if seeing a photograph of something if to try to argue that that's hearsay, and you have to bring in the person who took the photograph in order to get the stuff admitted into evidence, we know exactly who to subpoena. You subpoena the Blue Book people and say, there's the files, bring them in. But he didn't have to subpoena them. All he had to do is ask them for them. And as far as I can tell, he either didn't do it, or if he did, then he's lying about whether he had the ability to confirm it.
I'm curious, when you viewed these documents, was there any indication as far as where these photographs were taken, where this crash occurred?
Well, it was interesting that I should have, that's for sure. But when I got access to the files, and I walked into this room, and the guards had stood at the door and taken my briefcase away, but I had a yellow pad under my arm, so I brought it in, and I sat down, and they were in little like large shoebox size things, and they had these canisters of microfiche. And there was this old little tin microfiche machine that was there, and then I put the first couple different spools of the microfiche in, and there were tons of these documents. And I was saying to myself, wait a second, if I start trying to read these documents like a lawyer, I'm going to be here like all day. So I was looking for photographs to see what I'm looking for. So I started looking through it, and I guess got about the third or so can of these microfiche film. And there were the photographs of this crash retrieval operation. And what I did is, once I traced the exact details of what these symbols were around the bottom of the dome of this craft, I said, I'm getting out of here.
I don't blame you.
I'm
right.
I've got it now, so I'm getting out of here. So I closed it all back up and put it in there, got up and walked out. As I said, when I walked by them, I picked up my briefcase that they'd made me leave outside, and I started walking down the hall. And one of the guys said to me, "Hey, wait a second, hold it there. What have you got there?" And I said, "Oh, this is my briefcase. I just picked my briefcase up." He says, No. He says, "What's that under your arm? What's that under your arm over there?" So he comes over. Both of them came over to me, kind of loom up over me, and one of them yanked it away from me, and then ruffled through the yellow pages. But I had traced the symbols on the craft on the inside of the cardboard backing of the yellow pad, legal pad, and so they didn't see them, and so they handed them back to me. So then I walked out, so that. as I say, I know what it was, and it's not hearsay to be able to testify directly to seeing a photograph. I mean, it's like if you got a photograph of somebody stabbing somebody in the chest, and the issue is a criminal trial. Do you have any evidence that Joe Blow is the guy that killed this guy? You say, yeah, in fact, there's a photograph of it, and I saw the photograph of it, and then they say, yeah, well, you weren't there watching the killing. No, but I've seen the photograph of it, and that's the evidence that we've got, and that's the evidence that I gave to Sean Kirkpatrick, and I told him also at length about my having interviewed Sergeant Clifford Stone, who earlier I talked to him at great length, and he gave me details about the military unit that he was in. Was a full-time crash retrieval military unit, and testified to me that he had under oath that he had seen a number of crashed saucers as a member of this crash retrieval team, and had recovered UFO bodies, that were non-human bodies. And I told Sean Kirkpatrick about that under oath. And I don't know if he lifted a finger to try to get additional information about that from any of the government sources. And if he didn't, it wasn't because he didn't have subpoena authority. That just isn't true. That's a complete misreading of his responsibilities. Otherwise the AARO office would be just a complete shell. It doesn't have any kind of effectiveness at all, except to be a place where people can come, and it's sort of like a confessional, and go and do confession. I know all about this program. Yeah. And I feel really bad about it, and I wanted to tell somebody, and then he just jots down some notes and says, good, I'm happy you came. I hope you're feeling better. Do 2 Our Fathers and 3 Hail Marys. I mean, that's not what this AARO was supposed to be about.
Absolutely. So if Kirkpatrick did purposely, if he lied, could he be held criminally liable as an intelligence agent lying to Congress about it? Are there any repercussions?
That's one of the major problems that we have. That under the UAP Controlled Disclosure Act of 2023 that was drafted by the Senate and passed by the Senate and passed unanimously by the Intelligence Committee of the Senate, 17-0, that had enforcement mechanisms. That the panel that was supposed to be reviewing all this information had the authority to go to the Attorney General and have subpoenas issued to bring the people in and put them under oath. And if they lied, then they could be punished for perjury. But those were the very provisions of the bill that were taken out by the Speaker of the House, this guy, Michael Johnson, in coordination with Michael Turner, who was the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. They purposely went through the act that was passed by the Senate and combed out of it any of the enforcement mechanisms. Now, it wasn't unimportant, the law that was passed on December 22nd of 2023, which ordered the military services and intelligence agencies and Defense Department agencies and aerospace corporations to turn over all of the information to the Library of Congress, to the National Archives, rather. They've been ordered to do it, but the point of your question is, what if they don't? So what? So what's going to happen to them? Nobody's going to do anything to them. So that's why the Congress now is reviewing that whole thing, trying to figure out how much of the enforcement mechanisms they can get put back into the statute and get passed. Because the date is arriving, the October 18th date, when this information is supposed to be turned over to the public, or some significant portions of it. The clock is running, but if we get to October 18th and they don't turn over anything, there's nothing in the statute that can punish them for it or make them do it. So we have that continuing charge in front of us to get Congress to pass some sort of enforcement mechanism that can compel compliance with this new law.
And the lack of an enforcement mechanism, that was part of the issue as well, from what I understand, with Iran-Contra and other. There were no legal mechanisms to enforce it, right?
Well, that's when then I was directly involved in that. What happened is in 1984, the United States Congress passed a statute prohibiting the Reagan-Bush administration's Defense Department personnel or intelligence agencies from giving any aid, military aid, direct or indirect, to the Contras in Nicaragua. And what happened is the Central Intelligence Agency just ignored them. Again, asserting their power that they've garnered unto themselves to just defy Congress when they feel like it. And they went about it, smuggling weapons to the Contras, pilfering weapons out of the United States Pentagon, setting up a whole program, which we uncovered, of sending out weapons to these state defense forces, and then revaluing the weapons that have been provided to them by the Pentagon from their original value to their much higher replacement value, and then retaining the rest of the weapons, hiding them out, and smuggling them to the Contras. We caught them doing that. That's how we initiated the major federal criminal racketeering charges against the members of the off-the-shelf enterprise that were working with Oliver North. Richard Secord and Tom Kleins and Ted Shackley and all of these people. And they were working directly with the Central Intelligence Agency in complete defiance of the Boland Amendment. The problem is that the Boland Amendment didn't have any enforcement mechanism. So nobody could do anything about it. So what we did as a private citizens group is we brought the federal criminal racketeering charges against them, filed a major federal civil lawsuit against them in the federal district court down in Miami, and we brought the criminal complaint directly to Ross Perot, who was a member of the President's National Security Advisory Committee, and had him bring the criminal complaint directly to Bill Webster, the head of the FBI. That's how the investigation of Iran-Contra began. And it led to the revelation that required the Congress to hold public hearings on it, and ended up generating the appointment of a special prosecutor in the indictment of a large number of the high-ranking officials in the Reagan-Bush administration. And it would have led, in fact, all the way up to President George Bush, except he pardoned in kind of a Trumpian manner. He effectively pardoned himself by pardoning the people who the special prosecutor, Lawrence Walsh, had gotten indicted in order to force them to provide criminal evidence against Bush himself and his national security advisor, Donald P. Gregg, who were helping to coordinate the entire weapons supply operation, out of the White House in complete defiance of Congress. I've had that direct experience. So I've been involved in a lot more than just getting the 47 volumes of the Pentagon Papers published by the New York Times. I've been involved in the Iran-Contra investigation. I've been involved in the Watergate burglary investigation, working for the F. Lee Bailey law firm. We represented James McCord, who was the CIA wiretapping specialist that was caught in the Watergate Hotel. He's the one, when we were representing him, he's the one that wrote the letter blowing the whistle. He wrote the letter to Judge Sirica blowing the whistle on the White House plumbers and Richard Nixon that led to his resignation. So I've been involved in this particular kind of legal practice now for 50 years. So this involvement of our New Paradigm Institute in overseeing the activities of the AARO office is nothing new. And we're meeting with members of Congress, the House and Senate staff, to get them to put further enforcement mechanisms into this legislation so that they can do their constitutional job so that we don't have to do it. But if they don't do it, then the New Paradigm Institute has an entire cadre of a dozen attorneys now that are working together, and we're going to take the steps that are necessary to get this information revealed to the public in a sound and responsible manner.
Back in November, myself, Josh Boswell, and Christopher Sharp, we wrote an article about the Daily Mail, where we detailed how the actual crash recovery program worked, or continues to work, which is under the CIA. What we were told by multiple sources is that the entire UAP portfolio is is under the CIA, under the Directorate of Science and Technology, and this super secretive division called the Office of Global Access is the sort of manager of this whole thing. That there is a system in place, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance system that detects these crafts in real time. When they go down, the Office of Global Access tasks the recovery operation either to Joint Special Operations Command and their Tier 1 operators, or they task it to private aerospace. Now, I'm not an attorney, obviously, but would racketeering apply to that? Because one thing we were not able to determine was what the decision tree was. What would make OGA decide JSOC gets it versus Lockheed Martin? And the whole issue, too, of is it like a non-compete thing? What are the legal ramifications for these aerospace corporations?
Well, there are a lot of them. I can tell you that, Matt. That's one of the things that our team of lawyers are doing, is evaluating all the different laws that have been violated here. It's a issues recognition project that we're engaged in, trying to understand exactly how many provisions of the Constitution are being violated, what federal statutes are being violated, what regulatory rules and regulations are being violated, what aspects of the Administrative Procedures Act are being violated by these people. The fact of the matter is, since they view themselves as being part of the government that is responsible for prosecuting people, and so that as long as they can persuade the Justice Department people not to prosecute them, that they can do anything they want and completely disregard all the criminal laws, and they somehow are pretending that isn't illegal. It's like Richard Nixon saying that when I do something, it can't be illegal because I'm the president. It's exactly what Trump is asserting now, that he's completely immunized. He could actually, his lawyers are asserting he could actually murder a political opponent, in his reelection campaign, and nobody could do anything about it. And if they tried to do anything about it, he could pardon himself. That's ridiculous, but it is just stating again publicly the exact attitude that the national security state people have about their existing above the law. And that just isn't true, as a matter of fact. In this particular area, there are all kinds of rules and regulations that prohibit the government from just turning over this extraordinary technology to a hand-picked corporation, and then allowing them to gain an extraordinary advantage over their competitors. They're not taking bids on the contracts. They're not doing any of that stuff. We're going to be identifying all the different areas where the laws are being violated, so that we can decide what type of legal action can be undertaken. Now, under the Federal Criminal Racketeering Act, you can't charge government agencies. The Federal Criminal Racketeering Act that was written by G. Robert Blakey when he was the legal counsel for the Senate Judiciary Committee. He drafted this and explicitly excluded the ability to bring a federal criminal racketeering charge against agencies of the United States government. But what we did in the Iran-Contra case is we named all of the private people who were working with them that don't have sovereign immunity against criminal prosecution. So we named them, and we brought the action against them, and that's how we generated the information and the evidence that we were bringing not only to Ross Perot and to Bill Webster, but we were bringing to John Kerry in the Special Select Committee that was in the Senate investigating the Iran-Contra matter. And that I set that up in a meeting, with Tip O'Neill, the Speaker of the House at that time, set up the deal. And I went and met with the people over on the Senate side, who agreed to set up the Select Committee. That they asked me who I thought ought to head up that committee. Per the advice of Tip O'Neill, I particularly personally recommended John Kerry to set to chair that hearing. So we were providing all that information to them. And that's what required the United States Congress eventually to hold open hearings about this. We're going to be doing the same kind of thing now with regard to the UFO issue, in the issue of the existence of this extraterrestrial civilization. We're going to make the Congress perform its constitutional responsibilities, and we're going to stop the deep state, national security state apparat that is functioning unconstitutionally from continuing to do so. I mean, that you would assume that the Justice Department would be active in doing this,
You would
but
think.
they're not. But they're not.
Right.
The problem is that they've got a conflict of interest because they've got agencies functioning now under the Constitution. Article 2 vests the president with all this authority. And what's happened is the president has, over time, have set up all of these different agencies to function in his stead. And they're ostensibly vested with the same authority that the president has. And and then you guys like Dick Cheney come up with this idea of the unitary executive, where he believes that, that the president of the United States can personally order any one of these agencies to do anything he happens to want them to do. And they can't do that. They cannot defy the authority of Congress to oversee the conduct of the United States military forces and intelligence agencies. They can't do that. It says right in the Constitution that the Congress of the United States has the authority to do that, and they need to exercise that authority now.
Now, there's been some talk of sort of reconciliation, like giving people a pass that have been part of this just to try and get this whole thing into the sunlight. Now, one of the things that we discovered in our research on the Office of Global Access, we've heard for quite some time that people have been killed, physically intimidated, and whatnot. And one of the things, we didn't publish it in the article, is we were told by multiple sources that there was actually a rogue element of Joint Special Operations Command that was tasked with the wet works operations. People like that, if they are either part of a security contractor, they are not officially part of JSOC, would they be criminally liable, say, for murder or assault or anything like that? Or could they say, you know what, the CIA told us that we were authorized to do this and their hands are washed clean?
Well, it depends upon what judges you get them in front of now.
Okay.
That's the thing they call the IRT team, the International Response Team. It was originally created inside the United States Special Forces. They had SEAL team people on it. They had Army Special Rangers on it, and what they were tasked to be deployed only internationally. Which was part of the problem. When you start authorizing them to be deployed internationally to go assassinate someone or to kidnap them, and slit their clothes off and put them in, burlap bags and drop them out of helicopters. When you get them being authorized to do that kind of thing in peacetime, that the bottom line is that stuff bleeds back into their domestic activities. We know that the Central Intelligence Agency, Theodore Shackley, who was the ADDO, the Associate Deputy Director for Operations for the CIA, handpicked by George Bush Sr., that he personally was involved in authorizing the moving of money generated from the drug smuggling operations of Bang Pao in Southeast Asia, money that was in the Nugan Bank in Australia. He had that money funneled into the election campaign of Frank Church up in Idaho, because Shackley was so pissed off at him over the fact that he had chaired the Senate Select Committee on investigating the illegal activities of the CIA, that Shackley wanted him unseated. So they unseated him with money. They did the same thing to Dick Clark, the United States Senator from Iowa, who had opposed the covert criminal operations of the CIA in Africa, such as assassinating Patrice Lumumba. This is known by the members of Congress that this is going on. They've got to do something about this. I mean, this national security state is out of control. This is exactly what was warned against, back in 1947 when Truman was asked by Brown Brothers Harriman, this private investment firm that was the CEO of which was George Herbert Walker, that Robert Lovett, who was one of their senior partners, is the one who drafted the bill or drafted the letter and sent it to Truman asking them to set up a covert operation group like the CIA to be able to conduct the same kind of operations that the Office of Special Services conducted during the war. So that they wanted to have a continuing war going on, authorizing some group to conduct themselves as though they were operating under the rules of war. And that's how they perceive themselves. And so that they believe that they have the authority to lie to Congress, to cheat and steal and kill. And that we have talked with people now who have said that they have direct knowledge of people being murdered, actually, to try to keep this UFO secret confidential. And we know that people have been threatened with death. We know that their careers have been destroyed. We know that they've had information given to their families to make the families think that they're mentally ill. They've ruined their lives, and that there was a covert program that was being coordinated by the Central Intelligence Agency and the Defense Department to undertake those kind of covert activities against private citizens who were trying to simply report, as loyal citizens, report this information to their government, and they were silenced. So this is something that has to be uncovered, has to be dug out, and has to be presented to Congress, and Congress has to do something about this. The New Paradigm Institute, with 12 lawyers, is capable of doing some stuff, but the fact of the matter is, our major objective is to get the constitutional juridical structures of our government to perform their constitutional duties. Not just to hem and haw around about it and do some kind of cosmetic piece of legislation, which is what all has been passed right now, to try to pretend that they're doing something, that they've got to do their job right now. And I know that there's a significant majority of the people in both political parties, in both the Senate and the House, that want this done. And they can't be staved off by 2 or 3 people in the House of Representatives who are on the payroll, basically, of the private aerospace industry that wants to make trillions of dollars in profit on these technologies over the period of the future. That just has to be stopped right now.
There was one source that told me recently that the market capitalization alone on this technology is an unimaginable figure of trillions and trillions of dollars.
Yeah, no, there's not any doubt about that, Matt. You're talking about them trying to get intellectual property rights and control over this technology by keeping it secret. The fact that they've just been given it by an extraterrestrial civilization, that somehow that they're going to get the intellectual property rights to this and be able to get money every single time this technology is ever deployed in any type of vehicle or any kind of technology in the rest of the history of the world. This is incredibly irresponsible. People have to have a different motives than just trying to get as rich as they possibly can privately. Right. This is incredibly crass. This is embarrassing. It's like when a pickpocket meets a saint, all he sees are his pockets. This is an extraordinarily low level of consciousness that we're dealing with here in the private business sector, and they can't be allowed to be the ones making decisions, controlling the availability of this technology and the information to the people of the world. They just can't be allowed to do that, and that's the job of the New Paradigm Institute on Capitol Hill, is to stop that from happening.
Now, one of the things, and this touches on what you were just speaking about, one of the things that we had heard regarding the stripping of the UAP Disclosure Act was the eminent domain issue. We know Travis Taylor said something that, we didn't want somebody coming to Skinwalker Ranch and taking it away, the government taking it away. How does eminent domain work in the IP? Because the other thing that I heard was what Travis Taylor was speaking about was actually false, that would not be an issue. There were provisions for that in the legislation.
Yes. All of what you're saying is true. The bottom line is eminent domain is a very specific provision. For example, it is in the Constitution of the United States and it is in the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution, and it says the following: blah 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 blah. Here it is. It says that it's in the Fifth Amendment where it says property. You cannot take property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. That's the right of eminent domain. It's set forth in the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution of the United States that there is an authority on the part of government to take property. Now that's assuming that they own the property legitimately. And that's a fundamental question here. If a United States government secret agency, recovers a downed UFO, then, and takes it to a private aerospace industry, say hypothetically Lockheed Martin, or Radiance Technologies, and says, here, we want you to show us how this runs. You got the proper scientists and engineers and stuff here. See if you can tell us how this operates and how the government of the United States can utilize this. That doesn't mean that they own it. That doesn't mean that it's their property, unless the government were to take some kind of steps legally to transfer the title to them. And the fact is, if they haven't done that, they don't own the property. And so that the recovery of the property back into the custody of the United States would not even require an exercise of eminent domain. Excuse me. But the bottom line is that this is not information or technology that should belong privately to private individual people. This is something that the entire public ought to have the advantage of, all the people of the world, indeed, over this. Now, and in fact, what they were talking about in that instance is that nobody was talking about going to Skinwalker Ranch and taking information that they had there. It was obtained on private property by private people. Excuse me. What they were talking about was UFO craft. Now there is some evidence, and I've been given some of it, that Lockheed Martin actually developed a retrieval team to go out and retrieve de novo some of this, any one of the downed UFOs. But the bottom line is the UFOs that have been recovered by the United States military forces or intelligence agency forces, or the Joint Special Operations Command, or the group that you're talking about, that becomes property of the people. That becomes property of the United States government, and it's available for the benefit of everybody. And if they decide that they want to put it into the hands of a private aerospace industry for the purpose of at least figuring out what it is, then pay them reasonable fee for the services. It doesn't mean you have to give them the property. They don't have to have, personal ownership of the property and be able to own that technology for the rest of the future, for all the tens of millions of iterations of that are going to be used in the future. That's ridiculous. All that is just a function of avarice and greed on the part of those private corporations, which of course is consistent with what their objectives are, is to maximize their own personal profit for their shareholders. But that's not a proper motive to have functioning, determining the policies of our people, our human species, about how we're going to deal with the issue of the extraterrestrial civilization and the technology that they have. So, the problem is not with the work that was done at Skinwalker Ranch, for Bigelow and the other people. What it is that there are private aerospace industries like Lockheed Martin and Radiance Technologies that are basically hiring people out of our government who have this information, and they're trying to then transform it into private property. And that's what's motivating some of the pushback against the legislation. It's not to try to protect the private property that's been gained independently by a private party in the Skinwalker Ranch. It's to try to protect the property that's been put into the hands of private aerospace corporations that are paying people to stop the legislation.
I want to shift gears for a second. So I've said on this program that in my view, we, the American people, Congress, have been subject to a disinformation campaign. The level of coordination between these journalists, and of course we know from the Church Committee that the CIA had been paying dozens upon dozens of journalists to toe the CIA party line.
42 of them.
42. Oh, okay.
42
Wow.
of them were designated. Wow. Yes.
Okay. So when you look at, for instance, the rollout of this and the coordination between the journalists all having the same talking points, essentially saying that Congress was duped by a dozen or so UFO fanatics that happen to have security clearances. One of the things that we know is that Pentagon Public Affairs Officer Susan Go cut these backroom deals with these journalists to give them early access. And in my view, it was so, you had people like Julian Barnes from the New York Times that would talk about space aliens and whatnot. You would have a handful of news outlets on the dole of the Pentagon that would put these talking points out. And then, of course, everybody would follow suit. And the headlines you would see everywhere, which, of course, we did, was no space aliens. Now, you were recently on Ross Coulthart's new News Nation show, Reality Check, which, by the way, if you guys aren't following Ross, he's a good friend of mine in the show. He's doing amazing work. Now, when you appeared on that show, you spoke about Executive Order 12333. Yes. What is it, and how does it apply to the UAP issue?
Well, that was an executive order that was issued by Ronald Reagan. Executive Order 12333. It was an executive order prohibiting any of the people that are in the intelligence community of the administration from engaging in public propaganda to try to influence the political opinions of the American people. This is now the fact that the executive order was issued was just trying to head off the Congress, to keep the Congress from passing a law punishing that activity on the part of the intelligence agencies. And so it was an internal rule that was issued by the executive branch. And if the president decided he wasn't going to enforce it against his own people, then it's a useless statute. It's not even a statute. It's just an internal rule. And if it's not going to be enforced by the president, and then it's meaningless. But what it did is it prohibited the activities such as there was a project called public diplomacy. There was a public diplomacy activity, ironically enough, undertaken under the Reagan-Bush administration to try to lie to the American people about the fact that they were supplying military equipment illegally to the Contras. There was a whole public influencing campaign going on by them. And when we revealed that during the Iran-Contra investigation, that's when Ronald Reagan issued this kind of, papier-mâché rule. But the fact is, it is being violated. But there's no way that anybody can force the president to enforce it because he's done it through his own discretion, issuing that order. So, but it is being violated because there's no doubt at all that this particular report that was given out to the Congress by Sean Kirkpatrick and his people at AARO was designed specifically to influence public opinion. And that's why they choreographed this thing of bringing in select people in the journalist community to publish this, and they spun the line that they're supposed to be espousing, and that's what they did. This is a part of what the national security state has been doing since 1947.
It's nothing new.
No, this is nothing new. But it is just as unconstitutional now as it was at the beginning. It's just as unconstitutional as it was back during the Iran-Contra case. But again, Congress hasn't moved to do what it needs to do to outlaw this and to make it a crime for them to do this. They're not allowed to engage in that kind of activity. It says in the National Security Act of 1947 that the Central Intelligence Agency is specifically prohibited from engaging in covert operations stateside, right? But I know from being in F. Lee Bailey's office, F. Lee Bailey was one of the men that was put on what they call Index 4. It was a list of 4 lawyers, domestic lawyers in the United States, that were on retainer to rush in and defend any CIA operative who was caught engaged in covert operations inside the United States, just like they
Wow.
were prohibited from doing. They had set up a whole defense team to do them. And that's one of the reasons I left the firm, because once I realized what was happening, I didn't want to be any part of that. But they don't care. They view this as a confrontation of power, the power of the national security state versus the elected representatives. And as you pointed out at the beginning of our discussion, that the national security state people view the elected members of Congress and even presidents of the United States to be part-time employees, that are coming at temporary employees that are going to be here for a limited period of time, and then they're going to be leaving. And so they are the permanent members of the national security state. And they stay here, and they're the ones that think they can run the government, and that they don't care what the temporary members of Congress or the president's office say or do, and it is rampantly unconstitutional. When I talked to Oliver North about it, Oliver North took the position, said it boldly, said it right out, says that look at the Congress of the United States, House of Representatives may control the purse strings. But if we can, that is the national security state people, if we can get money from some other sources, we can conduct any kind of foreign policy that we feel like.
Wow.
And I mean, it's just absolutely ignorant. It's not only ignorant, but it's malignantly so, and it's a fascist mentality that they have. And that it has to be stopped. So the question is whether Congress is going to now, faced with a situation where they have the largest bipartisan constituency on any issue that's been around for decades, that this particular issue has more support from the entire spectrum of political supporters inside the Republican Party, and the entire spectrum of political people inside the Democratic Party, people in both houses of the Congress, Senate and the House, than any issue that I've ever seen in the last 50 years. Okay. And so that they have this opportunity now to, through the mobilization of that constituency, to push back against this exercise of power on the part of the national security state, and to be dealing with issues, not only the most extraordinarily important issue of our time and of all time, the issue of an extraterrestrial civilization coming and going from our planet and being concealed from us by the national security state, but they have the right to push back against the structures of the national security state as a whole, permanently, to push back against them, to keep them from doing this over and over again. And that's one of the objectives of the New Paradigm Institute, is to carve back that power that's being asserted by the national security state to lie, cheat, steal, and kill, on behalf of the interests, primarily the financial interests of the major corporations that are hoping to make money on this particular process.
And is it because one question I always ask, it's like, well, why are they hiding it from Congress? Is it because the Pentagon is essentially doing the bidding of the defense contractors? How does that work?
Yeah. Well, that's basically what it is. What's happened is the entire military industrial complex that was referred to by President Eisenhower when he left office in 1960, his farewell speech, as people probably know, said, beware of the acquisition of more and more power on the part of the military industrial complex. And he pointed out, whether intended or unintended, the bottom line is they fully intend to garner as much power to themselves as they possibly can. And what they've done is they've co-opted the major agencies. We know that the big pharma industry has captured control over the World Health Organization, in the American Medical Association. We know that the military industry has garnered control over the Armed Services Committee of the House. They've gotten power over the Pentagon. The fact is that they're hiring the generals right out of the Pentagon, who are the ones in charge of making determinations as to which weapon systems they're going to argue they need to have. They're in direct cahoots with people from the particular military corporations that want to make as much money as possible on developing their weapon system. That's true. It's like I remember one time when I was legal counsel for all the inmates at the Manhattan House of Correction for Men. I was appointed by the Republican mayor, Lindsay, at that time, and there was a hearing that was being held because the inmates were complaining about the fact that they had been that the police people were lying in their cases, were committing perjury, were you're planting false weapons on them, taking money from them in dealing drugs, and they said that that these police officers were committing perjury, and the district attorney, Frank Hogan of New York City District Attorney, said he got on a television show that I was on with him. He said, "Are you suggesting that our police officers lie on the stand?" I said, "Are you kidding?" I said, "Every defense attorney in the city knows perfectly well that they lie consistently all the time.
Of course.
In district attorney's offices, suborning their perjury constantly. I've caught police officers right on the stand, lying under oath, on the stand, and confronting them with their own tape recorded information that they provided to the internal affairs people, and I bring the recording and the transcripts of their perjury directly to the district attorney, and he says, "Look, Dan, I have to work with these guys every day. I'm not going to prosecute any of these guys. They're given a complete pass on committing perjury, and the fact is, if you give a pass to police departments to commit perjury, and you give a pass to the military to lie to the Congress, and you give the aerospace industry and the private military corporations the authority to buy the loyalty of the military officials that are proposing military programs to the Congress, you're just begging for the kind of system that we've got. And we've got to take steps to stop this. That our whole generation, the baby boomer generation, has been exposing this kind of information for the last 50 years. The time has come now for us to bring this to a head, to work on this particular issue of the UFOs and the extraterrestrial civilization, which virtually everybody in our country wants to know about, and to push back against the national security state, to stop them not only from exercising this unconstitutional authority in regard to this particular issue, but to push back against them in general by getting a set of hearings like the Church Committee hearings that took place back in 1975 and 76 in reaction to the Watergate burglary and the revelation of the criminal activities that the CIA was engaged in. That we need to have a special Joint Select Committee of the House and Senate seated to dig into this information, and not to appoint all the people that are the most sympathetic to the industry, like they did, for example, in the Iran-Contra case. In the Iran-Contra case, they appointed a Joint Select Committee, and they picked the most pro-Contra people in the entire Senate and House to put on the committee, and tried to argue to me, who had filed a major federal lawsuit against them, to make them have the hearing. They said, "Oh well, if you can get these people to do something against the off-the-shelf enterprise, then everybody's going to go along with it." You don't need to have everybody go along with it. You don't have to have the people that are doing the crimes agree to be punished. You got to get the people who support you to stop them. Yeah, and we need to do it in this case. There needs to be a Joint Select Committee that is appointed, not of the people that are favorable to the nuclear weapons industry and to the rocket industry and the aerospace industry, but the people that are supportive of the people, of wanting to get at the truth about all of this, who want to get at whatever technology is going to be made available for the people, so the people can benefit from all of this. This is what we have to do. And all of the activity beforehand is just going to be preliminary to that. Until we have a comprehensive approach to this whole thing, it's going to be very, very hard to stop these people from keeping this stuff secret. We can fight on individual bills, like trying to get the enforcement mechanisms of the original bill passed by Senate put back into the law now. But there actually has to be a comprehensive select committee that's put together in light of the extraordinarily profound importance of this issue. of coming to realize that we are surrounded by an extraterrestrial civilization, and that we have to be brought up into partnership with this civilization and to participate in a way that is mutually advantageous for both of us.
Yeah, I think that totally makes sense. So speaking of select committee, so today, GOP lawmaker Eric Burleson, can't read it from here, Eric Burleson requested a House Select Committee on Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena on Tuesday, leading a bipartisan group of lawmakers demanding answers from the Pentagon on the unknown flying object. So that seems like a pretty good step in the right direction, right?
That's a step in the right direction. But what they should really do is have a joint committee with both the House and the Senate, so that when you get a resolution of an issue by the committee that has both House and Senate members, you can be assured of getting some legislation passed, so that it's not just one of the two houses, so that we need to have a joint select committee put together to undertake these hearings right now.
That totally makes sense. Going back to what you were talking about with the revolving door, it's really, all of this is completely obscene. There are days I think to myself, this is not the country that I thought it was. But for instance, you look at Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. So Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, he paid the Department of Energy, Oak Ridge National Labs, Battelle Memorial Institute, as director of AARO, he paid them to provide consultants. We know one of these consultants was a gatekeeper out of the intelligence community, a gatekeeper of the legacy program. He also paid for material analysis. And guess what? He's now employed by that same agency that he gave all that money to. Now that has to be a violation of law. Then you look at who was on the advisory board of Battelle, which was Ronald Moultrie, who was the head of OUSDI-NS, the outfit that harassed your client Lou Elizondo. And what was interesting, and we revealed this on the last show, Ronald Moultrie, when he testified in front of Congress, I think it was the House Oversight Committee, he asked not to be briefed on UAP before he walked in the door, so he could sit in front of Congress and essentially claim ignorance and not be lying about it. It was sort of lying by omission. But that's another guy. He was at Battelle, and interestingly enough, when we dumped that information about Ronald Moultrie being on the advisory board of Battelle, it was a few days later. It was completely scrubbed from the internet. But this whole revolving door thing, it's all just so corrupt and dirty. Now, let me ask you this. Do you think, you spoke earlier about 40 whistleblowers that have come through. Do you think, considering this whole AARO report train wreck, do you think any of these whistleblowers are actually going to go public?
I think that they're going to be trying to go public through public hearings called by the Senate Intelligence Committee. It's not a matter of them just going out on their own and holding press conferences or anything. What they're going to try to do is trying to get the juridical instruments of our constitutional government to function, to say, look at the Senate Intelligence Committee, who has the sworn testimony and documented proof and corroborating evidence to support the veracity of these assertions that are being made by these 40 whistleblowers. They need to actually convene official public hearings in the United States Senate and call these people to the stand and have them testify, just as the House Oversight Committee did with regard to Colonel Grush. They need to roll them out, and they need to roll them out one after another until the opponents of the bill, the 64-page bill, succumb. And say, okay, look at this is getting out of control now. More and more people are coming out and providing more and more information that we should probably be exercising a little more oversight with regard to. And so therefore, we're going to give in and we're going to agree to pass the 64-page bill and set up an independent counsel to oversee this whole process, so that we can get some kind of major rules promulgated, to be able to decide how much of this is going to be revealed, how quickly, and how long it's going to take to reveal all the basic information to the American people in a way that is digestible and comprehensible. And at the same time, be able to take the steps necessary to prepare for the impact of this information coming into our economy and into our culture. Because nobody's doing that right now. Because the national security state people have got the blockade up, nobody seems to think that it's important to get ready to prepare for the information as it flows into our culture. Whereas it's really important, and that's again why the why the New Paradigm Institute is in fact going to be doing that exact work, trying to figure out exactly what the concrete steps are that need to be taken in each of the different elements of our culture to prepare for the insertion of this new information into our culture. It's going to have repercussions on the economy. It's going to have repercussions on the domestic politics. It's going to have repercussions on the global geopolitics. It's going to have impact on our theology and on our fundamental human philosophies. We have to take the steps now to prepare for this, because part of the rationale that's being used by the national security state to keep this secret is that our society isn't prepared for it. And yet they're blocking the steps to prepare for it by denying that it's even true. Right. So we have to get started now preparing for this. And the New Paradigm Institute, and people can be part of this. They just need to go to newparadigminstitute.org and link into this. You'll find out all the information that we know about this. You'll find out what the courses are. You can take courses for college, university credit in ET studies. And I'm going to be presenting my third lecture in that area tomorrow from 11 o'clock Pacific time, 2 o'clock Eastern time. It's just go to newparadigminstitute.org under resources, and you can hook into this program. That we're going to be providing the information to people so that they can develop the kind of knowledge and skill sets that they need to have to adjust for this new information coming into our culture. That's what we're doing as we speak.
I love that, and that information is indeed coming. If you have a few more minutes, have a couple of audience questions I would love to put towards you. Okay, great. So Pierre, we touched on this a little bit. Pierre Ciscato says, "Is there material enough for legal action against Sean Kirkpatrick?"
Oh, I'm not contemplating any legal action against Kirkpatrick directly. The Justice Department doesn't seem to have any kind of a level of interest in doing anything here to wade into this particular problem. They've got enough challenges right now between now and the election, I think, to try to occupy their entire staff over there. But the bottom line is we are at the New Paradigm Institute, where our lawyers are actually involved in identifying what all of the different legal violations are that have been undertaken by individuals and organizations. And we're going to make that available to the Justice Department with a recommendation as to what should be done about this.
If there is somebody that is, we'll say, doing illegal things for the CIA, let's say this rogue group of JSOC operators that has been engaged in what works and what not, if they came to you guys, would you talk to them? What are
sure.
On the other side?
We have we're not on either side here. What we're the lawyers who are going to be willing to provide pro bono free legal protection to any of the whistleblowers. And any of the whistleblowers that come to us and are willing to provide information to the United States Senate or the United States House of Representatives or to the Justice Department, we will protect them. We will take the steps to see that they're not punished for this. I've done this in the past. I went to see Leon Kellner, who was the United States Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, when we knew who the people were that were smuggling the massive amounts of cocaine into the United States, because it was being utilized to help fund the supply of military equipment to the Contras. At that particular point, he said, well, I'll have to prosecute all of your witnesses beforehand. And I said, look, why don't we work out some deal to get some kind of consideration for them coming forward? And he said, oh no. I would have to punish them to the fullest extent of the law before I'd even be able to start taking any of their testimony at all. I said, that's completely ridiculous. I got up and walked out of his office, and I walked over to his secretary, and I said to her, because she'd seen me, coming and going, talking to him. I came out and I said to her, when was the last time that U.S. Attorney Kellner spoke with Ed Meese, the Attorney General of the United States? And she said, oh, he spoke with him just 15 minutes before your meeting. So I knew that they were coordinating this, so what I want to do is we want to be the liaison of lawyers who are trying to work to protect the whistleblowers, to get them to come forward. We will be involved in trying to propose to the Justice Department what type of clemency programs might be available. If they're not going to do it, we need to do it. The citizens, we're a people's law firm, and we're trying to provide the kind of services that the Justice Department should be doing. We want to be doing the kind of things that Congress should be doing. But they've got 1,000 things that they're doing. So we can propose the legislation, we can draft it, we can propose it to them, we can explain to them how it would work, and so that's what we're doing right now.
Got it. Another question from Pramod Rajal. Do you have evidence such as images, videos to present in court?
Well, I didn't take any copies of the photographs that I saw that were in the Project Blue Book files, but we have testimony. And when you start to review the information that's been provided by the whistleblowers to the United States Senate Intelligence Committee, they do have documents. They do have absolute, direct, court admissible proof to support the assertions that they're making. And the staff has gone to lengths to secure as much of that as possible.
And just to reemphasize this, people with firsthand knowledge have testified to Congress in a classified setting.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, that totally makes sense.
That's true.
Okay. Heiser Soze, question for Matt. Will you be doing anything on the Pentrick incident? I have no idea what it is. I have one last question for you. And because I figure if anybody would know, you might. The Kennedy assassination, I had heard that it was related to UAP. Is there anything that you can add about that?
Well, I know where that comes from. What happened is on June 5th of 1963, just like 5 months before the president was murdered. He demanded to be briefed in on the entire UFO issue. And he was in the process of that time. At that time, this was just 8 months following the October missile crisis in Cuba, where the United States and the Soviet Union came within minutes of launching a full, totally planet-destroying nuclear war against each other. Both Khrushchev and Kennedy had become totally personally traumatized by what had happened. And they were exchanging a set of letters, completely secret letters that were being carried by Norman Cousins back and forth between Khrushchev and Kennedy. And they had both begun discussing them each respectively starting to order the dismantling of the nuclear warheads, of the nuclear arsenals of both the United States and the Soviet Union at that time. And in that context, Kennedy had decided that he wanted to, in addition to removing the nuclear arsenals of both nations, wanted to have a joint space program with Russia, the United States and Russia to join together to develop a joint space program. And in that context, he wanted to reveal to the Soviet Union all the information that the United States had about the UFO phenomenon and the potential extraterrestrial civilization. And so on June 5th, he asked for that information to be given to him, and the CIA refused to provide it to him. Now, that is not what led to his being assassinated. What led to him being assassinated was the fact that he was planning to disassemble the nuclear warheads of our United States arsenal in coordination with the Soviet Union. And they were going to have Pope John the 23rd be the broker of that agreement. That was the operation that was going on at the time. Now, I learned all of that when I was general counsel at the Jesuit National Headquarters in charge of their social ministry office to really understand what was going on. And in addition to that, I knew full details about the assassination when I was in Lee Bailey's office, because, as I said, we represented James McCord in the Watergate burglary, and it turns out that the Watergate burglary had all to do with the Kennedy assassination. That's what they were in the offices of Lawrence O'Brien. Had been directed by President Nixon himself personally to go into the offices of Larry O'Brien and to monitor his telephone calls and to wiretap his office to determine whether Lawrence O'Brien knew that Richard Nixon, when he was vice president under Eisenhower in 1960, in June of 1960, ordered the creation of a political assassination team to assassinate Fidel Castro and Che Guevara. And that group of people, the S-Force that it was called, was set up at Richard Nixon's request, which he issued via secure phone system to Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes was a special consultant to the National Security Council's 5412 committee at the time, and Nixon knew that. And he conveyed this request to Hughes through the red phone systems, and Howard Hughes then went forward and had his attorney Bob Mayhew set up this political assassination team, working with Santos Trafficante. And that we know all about that. We know the details of how that happened and why they did it. And it was because they learned later that the President Kennedy was working with Khrushchev to try to disassemble, to utilize their respective executive authority to order the disassembling of the nuclear warheads. That was why he was executed by these people. And the people that killed him was the S-Force that were made up of the 15 anti-Castro Cubans out of Miami. Now, we provided that information to the people that did the select committee on assassinations hearing. And you'll remember that the Select Committee on Assassinations in their final report said that they've determined that it is more than probable that the president was assassinated pursuant to a conspiracy, and that the most likely suspects in this conspiracy were a certain element of organized crime and a certain element of anti-Castro Cubans in Miami. I mean, we know exactly who those people were, both of those groups, and so that we know exactly what happened. And it wasn't because, as such, that he was planning to try to reveal or just demanding to be briefed in on the UFO issue. So, but people who got a little piece of that, knowing that he made that request on June 5th, just have automatically assumed that must be why he got murdered. But that's not true.
That makes sense. Question from Gaz Roth. Why has AARO not been dissolved, considering they failed in their mandate? Any thoughts on that?
There hasn't been time. It's only been a week ago.
Yeah, that's a good point. Government doesn't move that fast.
They haven't been replaced. They're going to have to be replaced, by an effective group that's going to do the job, or their legislation has to be improved so that they're mandated to actually conduct these investigations, and they're given subpoena power. But the problem is, as long as they're still under the aegis of the intelligence community, the Director of National Intelligence and the Secretary of Defense, those are the two agencies that have been actively engaged in concealing and lying about this for decades. That's talk about the hen watching the hen house. Yeah. The fox watching the hen house. This needs to be an independent agency, or the Senate and House Intelligence Committee Select Joint Committee needs to do it themselves. and to have subpoena power and to hire investigators, and not people from the CIA as investigators or people from the FBI, but actually independent investigators from the executive branch. They've got to assert the separation of powers here. This is the power of the United States Congress under Section 8 of Article 1 to set forth the rules and regulations governing the conduct of our military forces, needs to be exercised because they've gotten out of control. If you deem the intelligence community to be part of the military, which is what they are, their covert operations are paramilitary operations, and they need to be reined in and put under the supervisory authority of the United States Congress, as is mandated in the Constitution. That's what has to happen.
Got it. Bill asks if the programs, and I take it he means the UAP, crash recovery, back engineering programs, if they are illegal, how are the NDAs that they require the people that work on these programs, how are they legal?
They're not.
They're not. Wow.
They're not. You can't have someone be effectively sworn not to tell about something that they're doing that is illegal. That here I'm engaged in a criminal enterprise and I'm going to sign an NDA to promise I'm not going to explain how we're planning to rob a bank. That's not an enforceable contract. That's considered to be a contract contrary to the public interest. And there's an exception to the enforceability of contracts that are contrary to the public interest.
Wow, it blows me away. Last question from our viewer, Ned. Do you think any of the aerospace corporations can be subpoenaed?
Yes.
Absolutely.
There's any doubt about that. There's any doubt about that,
Yeah, boy, I certainly hope they get their house in order. Well, Danny, I have to say, talking to you is such an honor. The history that is in that brain of yours, man, it just completely blows me away. It is an honor. Thank you so much for joining us and giving your insight. I know everyone really enjoys and values what you have to say on this topic. And we've included on our YouTube description how we can reach you on reach the Paradigm Institute. Is there anything that you want to add as far as how people can, rise up and really help what you guys are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. When you go to newparadigminstitute.org, go to the part that points out that we're organizing a citizens disclosure movement in the country, the Citizens for Disclosure. We're going to be establishing action teams in every one of the 435 congressional districts in all 50 states. And people are going to be writing to their local newspapers, letters to the editor. They're going to be going to their local Kiwanis clubs, American Legion posts, going to their local high schools, talking at assemblies, going to their local colleges, doing everything that we can do. We've got to mount a massive citizens mobilization here about this. This is the most important single issue facing the human family right now, and we need to be treating it with the seriousness to which it deserves. That's what we've got to do. So join the New Paradigm Institute. Become a member of the Citizens for Disclosure. Become a member in your local area of your action team, and to support the entire operation that we're doing, and also familiarize yourself with all 8 of the major missions that we're engaged in. I've touched upon them as we've gone through this, but in addition to being responsible for helping to oversee the activities of AARO to make them comply with their mandates, we also have to oversee the actions of Congress to make sure that they're fulfilling their constitutional responsibilities. We've got to undertake to provide the type of legislation and regulatory rules and regulations that they aren't taking the time to design, to provide them to Congress. For example, that our office, the Romero Institute, which is the 501c3 organization that is the sponsor of the New Paradigm Institute, we're the ones that were asked to draft all of the enforcement guidelines for the Indian Child Welfare Act. that now got sustained by the United States Supreme Court to mandate that Native American families are given priority and preference for the placement of Native American children in order to maintain their contact with their culture. We do things like that so that we want you to come to understand what all the things are that we're doing at the New Paradigm Institute that have directly to do with the UAP issue or the UFO issue and the extraterrestrial intelligence, because we have to get ready. All four generations that exist right now are so fortunate to be born in all of time of our human family, to be born at this extraordinary moment of inflection, where the rules and regulations and principles that are going to be governing our relationship with the extraterrestrial civilization are going to be crafted in the next 5 to 10 years. The time period of the Senate statute was 7 years. A 7-year statutory period during which this information was going to be rolled out in a completely comprehensive and responsible manner. At the same time, we're going to be taking steps to prepare our culture for integrating this information. So we're working on the same time scale at the New Paradigm Institute. We're going to be complying with the intent of the United States Senate to implement that. And even though we're being pushed back against by a tiny handful of people, individuals inside the House of Representatives who are on the payroll, basically, of the private aerospace industry, we're going to continue going forward, pursuing the objectives of the United States Senate. They're our client, in a sense, as are the people of the United States. We are the people's law firm. And that we're going to be doing this with regard to the unidentified flying objects subject and the extraterrestrial civilization. Come with us, join with us, participate with us, take the course. Take the course to get a full college credit master's degree in the field of extraterrestrial studies. This is going to be an absolutely indispensable credential to have when the information starts flowing and starts flying. You want to be trained up to understand this, to be able to answer the questions and to participate and to fill the positions that are going to be necessary, not only in the government, but in all private businesses and other things to adjust to this new world view. That's what's happening right now, and we're here to help prepare people for that. So join with us at newparadigminstitute.org and come on over and work with us.
I absolutely love that. And thank you, sir, very much for doing everything that you have done regarding this topic. And I'm really excited to hear about further developments at New Paradigm. There's no way the toothpaste is going back in the tube. And if the Pentagon, if the CIA thinks that, they got another thing coming. So thank you, sir, for your time. I very much appreciate it. And thanks again. It was a real pleasure.
I appreciate it.
Okay,
thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
To do this.
All right. Have a good one.
Thank you.
All right. So, folks, it absolutely blows me away. This is my second time having him on the show, but the amount of knowledge that he has and the legal thinking about this is just unbelievable. And my hat is truly off to him for what he has put together, the activism, and really the call to the American people to step up and say that this is not acceptable, that we are not supposed to be living in an America that is run by the national security apparatus. That's certainly not what I was taught in school, and I certainly, before I got into this topic and realized from people like Danny Sheehan how prolific this kind of influence is. So I would encourage all of you to follow what Danny is doing, look at what the New Paradigm Institute is up to, and put the time in. It is up to all of us. You can either sit back and just let the status quo go by, or you can make a difference in the world, join what Danny is doing and what other organizations I'm sure will be stepping up to the plate as well. Call your representatives, tell them, demand hearings. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. This is a completely bipartisan issue, but this is something that matters to all of humanity. And the only way that this is going to break free of this whole mold that the national security state has put up is for people to speak up and contact their representatives. Because, I don't know about you, but this is not the kind of country I would want to leave to my children with the way things are being run and the treatment of our elected officials who we think and we're told have all of this power, but in actuality, the people that are the private defense contractors and people in the Pentagon, they consider all of these folks temporary employees. And we cannot expect our lawmakers, our president that we elect, we cannot fairly expect them to conduct policy on behalf of the American citizens when we have this level of just obscene corruption by the Pentagon, by the Central Intelligence Agency, that really, if you think about it, they're treating us all as fools. And it just is obscene is the only way that I can really kind of put it. And then also as well, the other thing that I think is really, really important is the fact that you have the Pentagon, you have the Public Affairs Office of the Pentagon putting out all of this propaganda, orchestrating this messaging campaign against Americans to spin this insane, absolutely insane conspiracy that dozens upon dozens of people that have served our country, that have held the nation's highest security clearance, to spin this entire ridiculous narrative that they're part of some crazy UFO religion, and they have completely given up their career. They've put their personal safety at risk. They've put their family at risk, all in order to convince some Senate and congressional staffers that all of this is real. It just boggles the mind, and frankly, it's insulting to me as an American citizen that they think we're all going to sit back and buy all of this and just go along with the program. Call your lawmakers, call your senator, call your congressman or woman, speak up and do something about it. Follow what Danny Sheehan is doing at the New Paradigm Institute, and everyone has to do their part. This is a team effort. It is not up to just a few individuals. We all have to decide for ourselves that we are going to make a difference in our country. We are going to make a difference for our children's future and not sit back and let the Pentagon run the whole show. Because at the end of the day, that's not the country that I want to live in.